having to perform on demand, stand and deliver.
Uh-huh.
I realize that I can speak effectively off the cuff because I have been preparing for my entire life.
Yeah, right on. Well, here we are on the Good Ship Uncertain. This is Leadership Uncertain. We are here talking about adventures in confusion, power, love, and dignity. And I'm thrilled, as always, to have you here with me, Hugh. Pardon me while I adjust. I just like to give people the best uh, image of me that I can.
Mm.
Um, Today, of course, I'm interested in whatever's going on with you, and also, I'm aware of your having called me and left me a voicemail recently when I went live on another day to talk about my experience of navigating a situation where my inner wounded child got pricked and panicked in an interesting moment. Uh, and that's got me thinking about how, you know, eh, whenever you've got a purpose, and we leaders have a purpose, uh, the very often that inner wounded child comes up, and yet we've got to find a way to not make the inner wounded child the point. Sometimes it's our own inner wounded child, and sometimes it's the inner wounded child of someone on our team, the inner wounded child of a customer or client. There are ways that we may sabotage ourselves, or where we can really make hay with that fact. And so that's what I thought we might talk about today. I hate the light that I'm in, so I'm going to actually change it while you think about that.
Ah, well, okay. I tell you what comes up for me as you brought that up. I'm recognizing that effective communication, effective management, effective living all really revolves around the spectacular art of perspective management.
Mm,
Um, I found myself in a very interesting situation the other day where I was coming home from a trip, and a family member had offered to pick me up. And I realized that a very significant part of how I interpret love is a specific act that
mm,
I interpret love is if I am catered to when coming from the airport. And I realize when
mm,
I pick people up from the airport, I'm always there on time, potentially to meet them at their gate or at the first opportunity, because I
right.
feel like that imbues a sense of connection and love
Mm,
and kindness. And if I am left waiting at the airport for someone to pick me up at their convenience, I recognize that there was an option to tell a story
mm,
about that. And
mhm.
when I was coming back this last trip, I realized that I was in a place where I could choose my own adventure.
Mm,
Did I have to make a statement or did I have to make an inference about what it meant that I was
right.
having to wait an extra 10 whole minutes? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that means they don't actually care about you. You are an inconvenience, right? It means whatever else is going on in their life is more important than you, right? There's
And
that inner wounded child, right?
and I was at this
Yeah.
wonderful crossroads where I said, what if I weren't a jerk right now? What if I made this and they called on the phone and I know they felt bad about being, because my flight came in early and we could
Mm,
not have predicted that. And I realized in that moment I was playing a game and I would be playing this game for the rest of my days.
mm,
The game of choose your own adventure. How are you going to interpret this act, this moment right now?
mm,
What cast member will you play in the role? Are you going to be the victim? Are you going to be the hero? Are you going to be the sage? Are you going to be the tyrant? Are you going to be wounded? All justifiable
Yeah.
because you can always pick a reason to pick a fight. So always justifiable, whatever we chose. And I realized there was wisdom in pausing, and there was even more wisdom in not coming down on an answer. The more I just simply sat in this wonderful space of seeing what would come next, I took my bags. I walked out to a place. The phone call came. I said where I would be, under which numbered door. I sat down, started to take some very deep breaths, looked around, saw the traffic, saw people walking up and down, felt the breeze on my skin. I just started smiling for no particular reason. I looked at my phone, checked messages, and before I knew it, the person that was supposed to have picked me up came and picked me up,
Mm.
and I was in a car. And instead of being here, I was there. There was no extra value assigned. No
There were
extra.
simply events
Yes. So I was sitting
having
in one
released
place.
the story that
Yes.
you
And
were
then
telling yourself about those events.
absolutely. So in 1 second, I was sitting on a bench in front of the doors. And in another minute, I was sitting in a car in front of other doors, looking at other windows,
Yeah.
looking at other things, not necessarily being any more productive or any less productive in the company of people that I wanted, but even that was incidental. And it was very profound, just recognizing, oh, wow. And now the challenge is remembering this insight,
Mm.
because then the next challenge would come and the opportunity to completely lose perspective presented itself again, where I would get mad or completely uneven or lose perspective again, where I come down in a judgment and this is how it is and this it needs to be different, and I challenge what is, and I fight and I resist, and I feel like our most dysfunctional movements are available with the gift of the loss of perspective.
Mm.
And that's okay too, strangely.
The
Because we,
gift of the loss of perspective.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Interesting. So, I mean, I'll recount the story that you heard me tell on another live stream last week, where I was in a meeting with a bunch of investors. We were listening to a pitch for a new technology, um, and I had a question. I was very intrigued by this technology and by the pitch, and I wanted to get past some way that the pitcher was framing things in a way that it just felt a little like spin. And so I gave it a little context, and I was about to ask my question, and somebody at the other end of the table said, "I have to interrupt you because that context that you just set is incorrect." And then they proceeded to kind of take the conversation in a completely different direction.
mm,
And it seemed pretty clear to me that they had misunderstood the context that I had set, had completely interrupted and co opted the conversation. And I was very self congratulatory about the fact that I did not get upset about that in the least. I just was like, well, how about that? That's a thing that happened. My question wasn't important enough to me in that moment that I
mm,
felt like, oh, I've got to get my question in. Even more impressive to me, I did not I did not feel any need to uh, reclaim my status, having had them take it away by interrupting me, and I just simply let the conversation go where it went. I think, like you, I in this moment, I was not telling myself a whole lot of story about it in any way that got me compelled to do anything. I
right.
just I just let it happen. Afterward, they came up to me and they said, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but," and then gave justification that I don't remember exactly what it was for having interrupted me, which to me meant I'm not at all sorry for having interrupted you. I was completely justified. It was necessary for the good of the order that I do so. And and I quite honestly said, that's okay. And you misunderstood me, and that's okay too. And their eyebrows shot up and their head shot back, and they said, "Oh!" and spun around on their heel and strode swiftly out of the room. And I felt just an immediate adrenaline shot through my entire body. They weren't there any longer. There was no like fight that we were gonna have.
Mm.
And I was just like, how interesting that I am so adrenalized by that. And then I also noticed myself saying, "Oh, I got to find so and so because I know so and so had an issue with them recently as well." And so, at the very least, I can say, "Well, so hey, so and so, let me tell you what just happened with this person because I know you're going to be able to relate." And I just watched this whole thing happen. I've been listening to, maybe you're familiar with Joe Hudson
Mm.
recently. Joe Hudson is an executive coach and fairly enlightened human being from everything that I can see, and he's talking about often like what emotion are you trying to avoid?
Mm.
And so instead of doing any of that busyness, I went to the corner of the room and I sat down and I just thought to myself, what am I what emotion am I trying to avoid? And then the story that I was telling myself, and I could recognize that I had been telling myself the story since the moment her eyebrows shot up.
Right.
I started to hear the story of they're going to go out and they're going to tell everybody what a jerk I am, and they're going to tell everybody they should never have anything to do with me, and those people are going to listen and they're going to have nothing to do with me, and I'm not going to be able to be a part of this community, and I'm not going to be able to do business in this community, and so I'm going to go broke and my family's going to be out on the street. And like, what a story. What a story. uh, and so I became amused with myself even at the same time as that story continued to run. And I told myself, I do not need to go and find so and so. I do not need to tell so and so what happened so that I have some company in having had this experience with them. And yet, for an hour, I kept feeling the compulsion to find so and so. It was very interesting for me to just experience that compulsion and then just, uh, Joe Hudson talks about just the emotions are meant be to go through us.
Mm.
And what we do is we either discard them or we hang on to them. And so I just let it all kind of ride in a way that I don't know that I've done a whole lot before. And just got to, uh, and maybe this is what you mean. I'd be interested to hear you say more about the taking no perspective.
Mm.
I just did not allow myself to uh, associate with any of those experiences except as an observer and go, well, isn't that interesting?
I don't know that you can free yourself of a perspective. I said that I didn't come down on judgment. So there is a perspective and then there is an assessment.
Mm,
Perspective, I think, is how you look at things. An assessment is what you have decided that it means.
right. Sure.
And I know in my case, it was just really nice to not go to the trouble of the assessment
Mm,
because it's just very heavy. And I realized I had a choice. I had a choice. And I had another experience. I don't know that I shared this with you. I went to Nashville to a conference, and I had all these aspirations for working while I was there. Because a lot of times I get to do work at conferences where I just am able to be in the hotel room at moments when I don't feel like being around people, and I am just able to work.
hmm
So I was looking forward to setting up all these meetings and doing all this work, and I think I was rushing in my packing, and I packed a bunch of nuts in my bag. and the nuts were just the right weight that when I picked my bag up, it felt like my laptop was still inside it. So I get to Nashville, I'm unpacking my stuff, and I pick out all these snacks from my bag, and what's not there is my laptop. So I'm about to be 5 days in this place, no laptop. I just have my phone, and the Wi Fi is terrible at best. And I realized I'm about to have a very different experience.
Yeah.
Would you believe that this conference was the most successful conference I've ever attended in how
Mm.
we showed up and how
Mm.
we engaged? I spoke to 43 different entities for the purposes of just getting to know them, which is the most I've ever interacted with any group of people at a conference intentionally. Not that they were coming to talk to me, but I went out and sought them and wanted to learn more about them because I did not have the burden of being able to do anything. And I had to delegate everything to my team during this time. And now my sales director is telling me that she is considering having me never bring a laptop to a conference again.
Yeah, maybe you just have to give it to her, right? She
Well,
gets to be the
no,
keeper of the laptop.
I would just not bring it. And I tell you this because what was available was the sullen excuse and narrative that comes from tragedy. Oh my God, look at me. I don't even have the ability
Mm.
to work, and the story. And what we did instead was completely recharacterize. All right, well, we're going to have a different adventure and another episode of Choose Your Own Adventure. You know, the dice have been cast, the events have now neutrally presented themselves, and you get to work with them to determine what they mean. Are you going to make lemon sauce? Are you going to make lemonade? Your choice. And lemon juice definitely does taste a lot different from lemonade, but they're made of the same stuff.
I think about kind of where relationships get into these stuck loops of upset. And it's kind of like, well, you did something that upset me, which usually is some form of my inner wounded child is,
Mm,
whatever was or were the the most impactful injuries that we sustain as kids become the buttons that people can press.
mm.
For me, it's some form of I'm going to be excluded, right? The story that I told you, what my mind was telling me about this incident, right, is I'm going to be excluded to the point that I'm going to be out on the street by myself.
And mine is invalidation. Whatever
Um,
I am and whatever I care about or whatever I
yeah,
say does not matter. You want me
and
to go to 100 and want to fight you? Make that the experience and
I
watch
totally,
me.
I can relate to that wound as well. And so, what uh, what I recognize happens very often is if I had not taken that observer stance,
Mm,
it's very likely that I could have gone and pricked that other person's wounded child even further than it had already been pricked.
sure.
And our inner wounded child goes back and forth pricking one another. And what this increasing awareness on my part, I think, is allowing me is greater and greater compassion for someone else, which feels, I think, to a lot of people really soft, right? It's like, well, that person did interrupt you. You should have just grabbed the talking stick back. And I understand, and there are times when I would have, if it had been an important moment, if my purpose had been challenged by being interrupted, I probably would have found a way to get the attention back to me. And with this greater compassion, I think I would have done it more effectively. That when I am aware that when you act like a jerk,
Mm.
it's because you're trying to protect yourself from threats that may not exist any longer. and I can be more effective in how I respond. So I don't see this as being soft, right? I see this as the compassion has both the impact on me that I live an emotionally more enjoyable life, and I live a tactically and strategically more effective life as a leader, as a partner in any relationship.
It
I can
sounds
see
like
you're thinking a lot
rationalization.
of things.
It sounds like rationalization to me.
Say
So,
more about that.
because honestly, I keep coming back to the origins of the word perfect. It is, I think we've talked about this at some level, maybe in
Yeah,
the
it's
past.
yeah, I
There's
think
a
so.
there's a French origin, and the original word had nothing to do with the quality of an action and everything to do with the fact that it has been completed. So if you look at, we use the word to still describe tenses in verbs.
Mm,
So like the future
present
perfect,
perfect. Yeah.
the present perfect, the past perfect, all of those in which the action has already occurred. And now there is doubt as to whether or not it continues, but we do know that something has happened. And in that respect, when something is perfect, it's not because of its quality of existence, it's because of its existence at all. And when I listen to you talk, I will tell you for everything that other principle that I keep coming back to, the earth is fat in the middle and flat on the tops. You know from universal physics, any object, any amorphous series of any amorphous um, particulate stream of matter, when it coalesces in a zero G environment, it's supposed to be a perfect sphere. But our Earth is not perfect. Why? Because of everything pulling on it and everything that's happening, and homogeneous and non homogeneous and heterogeneous surfaces coming together with a thin sheet of atmosphere around it, and all the other mixtures of all the other things that are happening in the world cause it to not be perfectly spherical. And as a result, the shape that it is absolutely perfect given everything that's happening. And so I listen to your story and I think of the fact that everything you did in that moment was absolutely perfect. It does not mean that the action that you took, if you were to repeat it at some other time, would be appropriate. Not saying that. I'm simply saying the action that occurred was exactly what needed to happen for everything else to unfold. And to live in a space where you don't have to believe that to be true, but simply act as if it is, causes you to have a whole lot less stress. And you have the benefit of also learning from it because you recognize, okay, there's feedback there, right? You took this action, you were in this particular space, you had this particular intention, you had this particular inspiration, and you behaved exactly as everything pulling on you caused it to be. And now you get to make the most of it. Will you behave exactly the same way again if faced? Maybe, if it's appropriate. And you will find out. One of the things that I have become very, very enthused by is the idea that I will have enough intelligence to meet the challenges of the needs of the things that come when they come. I may not be able to solve the problems when they show up, but I will have enough intelligence to be able to face them. And that is a lesson that came from J. Krishnamurti. The idea is that intelligence is available to you as you are looking through your eyeballs, not as you are sitting down trying to pre-plan some activity or try to live up to some standard that isn't authentic to the moment that you're in. And so therein lies, the idea. So if you can simply recognize that you are intelligent enough, sensitive enough, you have enough sensory acuity, enough inspiration, and your heart is kind, where you're trying to live into the authentic principles that cause you to be who you are, then whatever comes is part of the adventure.
I think
And
that's
if,
right.
yeah, and if you're being really responsible about what you assess things to mean, and what I'm finding out is the longer I can delay that process, the more interesting life is becoming.
Mm. And I really appreciate that sense of delay,
Mhm.
right? Um, it reminds me actually a little bit of maybe you're familiar with Alex Hermosi.
Yes,
Right? He's
brilliant stuff.
unquestionably a brilliant businessman.
Yes,
His wife, likewise, Layla, brilliant in business, and they have. I don't know if it's a specific agreement between the two of them, but each of them I've heard speak about that in their marriage, if Layla does something that Alex could interpret one of two different ways, and one is that she has an intent that is positive, and one is not, his discipline is to choose to believe the former,
best possible intent.
right? The best possible intent, and likewise that she does with him. And I there's something I find very practical in that, and I really appreciate the distinction between that and what I hear you saying, which is not even necessarily to go there, but to simply delay the belief in whatever stories may be swirling your head in your head in either or any one of any million directions that stories may be swirling. You simply defer judgment as long as you can.
There's a very famous speaker. Maybe you've heard of him. Eckhart Tolle writes the book The Power of Now. And one of the things he said in the talk that I listened to, he said a good story is always better than a bad story, and no story is better than a good story.
Mm, mm.
And that causes me to pause. Now, do I fail this test often? Oh yes. Oh yes. Even
Yeah.
before coming into this call, I failed the test. Somebody said something to me, they showed me something, and I completely reacted in a manner that was almost foreign. It was like I was sitting outside my body looking at me react to this thing. And truth be told, I don't know that I felt that strongly about the thing that I was reacting to. I don't know
Mm.
that I actually felt as impassioned as I was projecting. And that's also kind of a
Interesting.
weird thing. Yeah. So, and that happens often enough where I'm having a very impassioned discussion, arguing for that which is right. And in the back of my head, I'm like, dude, you don't even care that much about what you're
Mm.
arguing for.
I think I can without I can't put my finger on any specific incident. I think I can recall the experience of doing that with my wife, where it's almost like if I pay attention to what I'm really doing, I'm putting on a show
Yes.
because I want the dynamic between us to be a certain way.
That is comfortable and you've done it for 20 years and
Much more, much more than I want this particular thing to be true.
yes. 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 All of that. Yes.
Yeah,
And it's like and at some point you realize it's just a racket. It's just
yeah,
a racket.
yeah.
And I know it it feeds into everything we're talking about because again, at some point you recognize, or I recognize, that if I am responsible to the moment, I am still playing the choose your own adventure game.
Mm,
And like I said to you, I keep forgetting. It's just
right.
a lifetime of remembering I'm playing the choose your own adventure game.
Yeah. Who was it who said some? You'll probably know this quote better than I do. Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Mm.
Does this ring a bell to you?
I've heard of it. I cannot
Yeah.
place it. I'm
Right. And
sorry.
in that space, we get to choose our response. And it so often feels like that space does not exist.
And there are times, if breathing slowly enough, there's an ocean between those two parts, those
Mm,
two places. And I'm learning slowly and getting my butt kicked every day that there's a lot of pressure for us to move quickly. The business has folks that are here to challenge us. That people are cast to demand things and
yeah,
to share their failed expectations of
yeah.
themselves and you, and they can bring you in, and you can get caught up in all sorts of stories and go
Well,
fight all kinds of battles. Go ahead.
we talk about, and how many leaders do I have talking to me all about putting out fires, right? I
Mm.
can't be there. I've got fires to put out. And I really appreciate one of the leaders that I work with regularly is the CEO of a library. And it's so wise of him. I really appreciate how often he tells his team, it's just a library. This is not an emergency room. Nobody's lives are in our hands. Um, and he's not at all uh, disinterested
Sure.
or detached in any kind of unhealthy way where it's just like, whatever, dude. That's not where he's at all. He's just simply recognizes they're dealing with books and computers and information, and it's all very important, and their constituents are very important, and there is no such thing as a library emergency.
Well, if the library is on fire and people need to get out,
That's a fire emergency, right?
right, that's
Different.
a human emergency as opposed
Yes,
to a library emergency.
right.
I appreciate the distinction, and we keep coming back to the theme of perspective management. And that's the game.
Yeah.
That's the game for the rest of our lives. That's the game for every minute, for every minute, for every day, for every week, month, year.
Mm.
And the dynamic is remembering once you've forgotten, because something will eventually take you away. And can you make your way back? Can you return? Can you return stronger, deeper, recognizing, okay, well, I just had a complete overreaction because I've now learned that my buttons now are deeper. So you were very smug and appreciating yourself for the fact that you didn't let this person throw you off the first two
Yeah.
stumps, but
Well,
then they
and
got you on the next one, and now you've learned, and then you went
yes,
deeper, and you had
it was a
such a deep experience that you made a video about it. Keep
it was
going.
kind of like a three-part gift, right? It's like at first I was interrupted, and that gave me an opportunity to recognize how far from the reactive sob that I used to be that I am now. And it was right of me to recognize that progress. That progress is real,
Yes.
and it helps me to, I've there's the book The Gap and the Gain, the thesis of which essentially is, if you're always looking at the gap that you want to close, right? I'm only here and I want to get here. It always seems like an uncrossable chasm.
Sure.
Whereas if you look at how far you've come, and that's your focus, well, then the gap that you're looking at shrinks by comparison, and you see your momentum. So it was a gift in that it gave me an opportunity to say, wow, this is a different nervous system I'm working with. how
Mhm.
how wonderful is
How
that?
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was the gift of the what did prick and trigger my terror. And so that was a gift as well. Is like, well, and there's more work you can do to get your nervous system under control. And then the gift of turning and walking away so that I could really experience that gap between the stimulus and the response. Because if they'd remained there, I don't know how much I would have experienced that I could have all the gap in the world, all the
Mm.
time in the world between stimulus and response. I could take all the time I might want to respond. And because I was no longer face to face with this person, I was left with nothing but that space.
So a friend of mine taught me. Unfortunately, you said something, and now my brain is stuck. So we get to unstick me, and I get to manage my perspective and not fight you. This is great. Uh, a friend of mine once taught me that control is an illusion. He taught me that control is an illusion, and the most you can ever aspire to is influence.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you just said that you get your nervous system under control, and I realized
Mm.
that triggered me. I got real triggered, and I watched that go around, and I was like, "All right, we're playing the game right now. Choose your own adventure."
Yeah, for you, dear listener, the friend he was referring to is me. So yeah, right. And in that circumstance, we're talking. I was, when we were talking about control being an illusion, we were talking about control of the other person. And
Mm,
yet, how often do we get experience that that we are out of our own
mm-hmm.
control? And yes,
The
indeed.
best we can do is influence, because
Yeah.
again, ride the wave. So I'm recognizing I have some very interesting health issues that I'm facing, and it's amazing to me how much my reality shifts when I thought, my body is under my direction and control. I know what I'm putting in, I know all these
Mm,
things. And then you get hit with the idea that, oh, well, now your level of expectation for what is happening in your life is now moved just slightly.
mm,
And there are effects that are beyond your ability to control. And yet, what is the purpose of the existence? What is the purpose of the exercise? You still get to do the things that give you insight, purpose, functional engagement, intrigue, love, kindness, grace. There are probably 85 summers that you get to be on this planet useful, useful summers, because the other summers are probably just learning how to eat and poop. But the rest of the time, you just have a very limited window in which you get to do things that cause you to punctuate your own humanity.
mm,
And chief among them is the ability to just settle in and enjoy whatever this is, whatever breath, whatever breath you've just taken that inspires your action, your thoughts, your contribution. You get to be here to enjoy this. And enjoy is a very big word. It doesn't
mm,
necessarily mean that you're happy. You could be in the middle of an argument. You could be in the middle of a lawsuit. You could be in the middle of bankruptcy. All of that is external stuff for which you control control. You influence the narrative of what it means, because all the action continues to be holy, for lack of a better word.
mm.
The insight is holy. The inspiration to take action has the opportunity to be holy. Yeah. And so we started off by talking about perspective management and choosing your own adventure. And we bring it back because the your ability to lead and make sure that no matter what happens, there is a way to have the opportunity serve you in whatever comes next. And that creativity is the stuff of breakthroughs, is the stuff of challenges averted, crises that become uh, the pillar upon which the next foundation of your business is built.
Mm.
And I know you hate when I say this because it sounds kind of trite, but it's usually those moments that cause you to pause. I mean, you were able to capitalize. You were so inspired by this exercise, this absolute loss of temporary perspective, but you were able to see it so that you made one of the most impactful videos I've ever seen you make,
Hmm.
to the point where I saw it. And when I saw it, I said, I have to call him just to let him know that I think this is awesome. And I can't imagine all the other people who may have had a similar experience, however they choose to react. You added value to the world because it was such a moving moment, and you made lemonade instead of lemon juice. Nothing against lemon juice; it just is much more corrosive
It's
and
hard to drink.
very a very different liquid for a different purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I say all of this to say that there is so much creativity available, given the ability to recognize when you could lose perspective, and when you do lose perspective and you recognize it, or you catch yourself in the middle of losing perspective. All of those experiences have so much value available if you're willing to capitalize, if you're willing to be humble enough to recognize, oh my gosh, this is happening in me. Where this goes sideways is if you say something like, oh, I'm better than this, I shouldn't be doing this. Well,
Hmm.
then you just find a different way to have the dysfunction rear its
Right.
ugly head and screw you over.
Yeah.
So,
And that's true, I think, when we're talking to ourselves,
mm,
and it's true when we're talking to our clients, and it's true when we are talking to our team, the folks whom we lead, that kind of judgment of you are or should be better than this really just ensures that you get to continue to wrestle with that inner wounded child
mhm.
instead of making progress.
Or
And
worse, the or you go backwards because you become self-assured. Because the other thing that was on my mind based on your story was where you said, well, you misunderstood me. Well, what if your premise was truly that wrong?
oh, right,
I mean, what if it
absolutely.
really truly that wrong and you're so oblivious that you can't even see it?
Yeah. Well, wait, and so why did I spin on why did they spin on their heel and walk out the room? Because my inner wounded child pricked their inner
There,
wounded child, which no doubt felt misunderstood and uh, dismissed in some
hmm
important way.
hmm
And so when I said you misunderstood me,
I
I
mean, that's violence.
dismissed.
That's violence to the right
Yeah,
person. That's
yeah.
almost like taking a knife to their shoulder.
Who knows how the interaction might have gone had I said. I was left wondering whether you actually understood the intention behind what I said.
Okay, can we make it less violent?
I don't know. What have you got in mind?
I'm wondering if I expressed myself in a way that was more understandable. Here's what I'm going for. When you say you misunderstood, if I'm someone who values intelligence,
Yes, got it.
you have just called me dumb without
Right.
calling me dumb.
So then, even maybe because without preamble, who knows what would have happened had
Mm.
I said, I wonder whether the message you received was the message I intended.
Much more neutral.
Right, totally. I get it.
Much more
Pro-
neutral.
I doubt, I doubt she would have uttered the single syllable "oh" and stormed out of the room.
I mean, it could have pricked
Who
some
knows?
other minefield could have been tripped, and we are just at least this point hypothesizing not to go relive or relitigate. What has happened has been perfect. At the same time, I'm bringing to your attention a string of violence. It's mildly violent, and I have to be careful about that kind of stuff myself because my mind can be very sharp, and I have to be careful how I cut because it can cut other people.
And I completely understand what you mean. And so for the viewer, the listener who is saying violent, what are you talking about? Uh, explain how you misunderstood me. Let's start with that most violent of the iterations we've employed here. How is you've misunderstood me violent?
Okay, it's because it's affronting. So you have characterized a series of activities as an interpretation in the past of you, somebody that is doing something to me, and some failing that I am assessing of you in real time.
Yes, and I would add that it violates what I call the get out of my head rule because I don't actually know
If she misunderstood you.
precisely what understanding she took.
Yes, there it is. There it is. That's a very elegant point. And again, we're having fun here.
Yeah,
This is lab. So there's
yes.
no judgment in this space.
And so, in that training program that I was running, in which you and I met, and in which I shared with the participants that control is an illusion. At best, we can have influence. One of the themes of that entire 6-day series was you will have greater influence with others when you give them the experience of having been heard and understood first.
There it is.
And so, if we're talking about leading with that inner child, that inner child's greatest need, in my experience, and I'm interested, Hugh, in whether to what extent you may disagree or agree with this.
Okay.
The inner child puts down their arms, will disarm themselves to the extent to which the inner child feels seen, understood, and valued.
I would I so I use different words to articulate the same point. I see you, I hear you, you matter.
Same deal,
Those are
right?
those,
Totally, completely.
so very the exact same conveyed shared feeling, just different packages, just
Yeah,
different words.
right.
And what I've come to appreciate is, and I had to learn this the hard way, it does not matter how right I am. It does not matter how factual, how
Yes,
absolutely corroborated, how substantiated, how righteous, how affirmed, how well intentioned. None of that matters
ain't it the
if there
truth?
if there isn't an acknowledgement. And I can only imagine that there was psychological accretion. What I mean. So she interrupted you. You took the high road. I'm just gonna tease you and say that you're smug. You say, look at me. I did
Oh,
not
I
take
was.
offense.
There's no question, right?
I did not take offense.
Yeah.
Look at me. And when you said, oh, that's okay, you just misunderstood me. Casual and lethal. And you didn't mean to go there, but it was an ego battle of epic proportions. And because it was so casual, clearly it wounded her to the core. Who draws up like they're being attacked and whips around and runs
Yeah,
away in a
pretty
huff,
unusual.
unless some pretty amazing things were at play. No, we're not
Yeah.
going to take responsibility for other people's actions. That's not what I'm asking you for. But I am saying, however, and I am saying that we get to watch the knives that we may
Mhm.
have inadvertently wielded.
Right. And sometimes they're not our knives that we are wielding. Sometimes they are simply, knives that people have arrayed around themselves, or
Waiting
which
to get
we have
stabbed.
waiting to get bumped.
Exact. No doubt. And in it just cause for pause, where we cut to the chase. Right. I was in an interesting meeting this morning where a customer wanted a discount. They wanted us to do some work. They wanted us to do some work, even though contractually they had run through all the provisions that would have given them any rights to come back and get what they were asking for. They were still asking for it anyway. And we were having an extra meeting, and truly, and I don't know, it would have been easy to just justify this as not being worth my time because what we were talking about was almost inconsequential, but that was not the point.
Mm.
They were sticking because there was a principle involved. And what was interesting is we ended up settling for what we needed to settle for, but the place where the call changed is where I took a moment and I spoke about their problem from their perspective and described it from their perspective and talked about how our performance was not as expected, not in our value stream, not the way we do business, and these were the things that were going to happen to make sure that it didn't happen again. The incident that we were describing for which they were trying to get remedy. And strangely, that portion of the conversation was more impactful than all the other things that came before. And we resolved very quickly what needed to occur. And what's interesting is I could have relitigated all the things that needed to occur so we could have gotten a few $1,000s more. But if you back up and jump to the higher perspective, none of it matters. So I was like, you know what? Is all of this about this one thing that if we resolved it right now, we could all get off the phone? They said yes. I said, okay. So let's just talk about that. If we
Yeah.
were to come to an agreement and this were the agreement, would you be fine? They said yes. I said, okay, let's do that. Now, when I went back to my salesperson, she's like, well, I did all these things. I was like, I get it. But guess what? We're going to be done. And because they are now where they are, they probably will do another 10 deals with us over the next year. And that's the point.
That's the
And
point.
that's how
And
you manage
so
perspective.
and so it it Stephen Covey said, with people, slow is fast and fast is slow. That's why our mascot at PS Works is a snail with a rocket on his back. We call him Wyatt. Wyatt, the slowest fast snail. And so it can feel incredibly slow to say to this inner child who is throwing a tantrum, I see you, I hear you, you matter, and take the time with that panicking kid. When all you want to do is get action X, Y, or Z, and the same is true. I've understood that to be true with others for a long time. Whether I have always got the wherewithal to exercise and discipline to that in a given moment, different question.
Sure.
And what I'm recognizing is that, as a leader, that's easiest for me. I can do that very easily with my team. I can do it with a fair degree of ease with clients,
Sure.
and I can do it with less ease with like the people
Family.
who are closest to me,
Yes, this is true.
family.
Yes.
And what I've really been finding recently is, leadership is not just a I am leading my team or I am leading my clients. It is very often, uh, if not always, I am leading me,
Yes.
and I need that vision that I see you, I hear you, you matter, from myself as much as my team does.
Probably more
Right? I
because
I,
because
I am stuck with me. Right?
you know you're the guy looking back in the mirror, and
Yeah.
strangely enough, you're the one that has the most amount of influence over the person in the mirror.
And if I can't give that gift to myself,
Hmm.
I will never fully accept that gift from anyone else.
And you can't truly give that gift to anyone else, not in full authenticity. Yeah, it's a beautiful place to end.
Well, you mean we got to stop now?
It's only been an hour.
I
This has been
I like having
amazing,
these
my friend.
conversations with you.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it because you're absolutely right. And Just, I love that we came full circle. And I love the fact that we've been able to express in so many different ways how to manage your perspective and choose your own adventure.
Mm, yeah. Adventure really is, such an important concept. There's a there's a reason this is Adventures in,
Hmm.
right? That speaking of control, as long as you don't have control, you're either on a roller coaster in all the worst ways possible, or you're on an adventure.
Yes. And it's all the same
And even
emotions.
there, even that is choose your own adventure, right? Do you
All
want
the
to be
same
on a
feelings.
on a rickety roller coaster that's falling apart, or do you want to be on an adventure? You choose.
Hmm. I love it. Thank you for today.
Yeah. Be well, and thanks everybody for joining us. If this is valuable, I hope that you will like, comment, question, subscribe, all the things that help make us visible to others and visible to you in the future.